Neal, I tell this to other lawyers. The most important commodity for a trial lawyer is not whether a jury likes you, but do they believe you? And that means, do you have credibility? And you can say, okay, how do you build credibility with strangers? There's only one way.
Law school taught you the law, but it didn't teach you this, how to connect. Be that one lawyer who shows up different, the one clients trust, the one they never forget. I'm Neal Goldstein, and this is That One Lawyer Podcast. Let's get started. I'm thrilled today to have somebody who is just has been a tremendous person in my life, and he's a lawyer, author, and strategist who's built a solo practice that runs like a well-oiled machine because he designed it that way. John Fisher is one of the top medical malpractice attorneys in the country, but he's also the author of several books, including The Power of a System, a book that has helped thousands of lawyers rethink how they run their firms. He's a mentor, a systems thinker, and someone who leads with integrity, whether he's guiding a client through a crisis or coaching a lawyer on building a practice. Also, I don't want to forget his incredible and highly successful mastermind group, the Mastermind Experience, a transformative gathering of elite attorneys, which I'll be chatting with John about. Last but not least, he is a friend and somebody that I'm quite fond of. John, welcome to That One Lawyer Podcast.
Hey, thank you, Neal. And when we met, which now is years ago, one of the things that so impressed me about you was your authenticity and how genuine you are and the no bullshit. And to me, you took your genuineness and you put it into a book, your first book, which was Who's in the Waiting Room. And when I first saw it, I was like, what's up with this title? And then as I read it, I was like, I totally got me engaged in your book, and I was so into it. And then the really cool thing about your book, Neal, was how it wasn't a story about you as the star. It was about really the story about your mother, who was the star of your life. And I thought that was such a cool thing because there's so much BS and self-promotion in our society, in our legal circles. And this was not at all self-promotional. It was just about the very humble circumstances that you grew up in, and the story of you, your brother, your mother, and your father, which had lots of really twists and turns, but some really hard times that you were so authentic about. And I thought that, Neal, I tell this to other lawyers, the most important commodity for a trial lawyer is not whether a jury likes you, but do they believe you? And that means, do you have credibility? And you can say, okay, how do you build credibility with strangers? There's only one way. That's to show your biggest weakness, your biggest vulnerability, and share it with them because they know that you're authentic if you're doing that. And that could be a weakness in yourself. It might be a weakness in your case. And I've done this, Neal. I'll stand before a jury and say, my client, they did an autopsy and they found his system was full of cocaine, and I've got no explanation, and you're not going to hear one from me. So if we should all go home right now, let's just go home. Right. And the thing is, I think the jury, when they hear that you're revealing your innermost weakness or struggles or vulnerability, they bond with you when you do that with them. So I've learned that you're taking the danger point in trial law, but also the relationships that you have with your spouse, your kids, and let them know you've been through the same thing. And I share my story, Neal, as a child of an alcoholic parent. Times were hard, man. I mean, in fairness, I never lacked for anything financially, like never. And it didn't really affect my motivation or my ambition at all. But people would look at my life and say, that guy had everything, man. And I was like, well, my dad was a lifelong alcoholic. So it looks better on the outside than the inside. And when I learned from people like you, Neal, to share my vulnerability, my weaknesses, and my struggles, that builds credibility, and people see that I'm not a BS artist. And in a courtroom, that credibility is everything.
Well, I certainly can vouch for everything you just said. I will say that the word bullshit will probably be used a number of times in this podcast because there is no bullshit here. And is a lot of bullshit elsewhere. And there are lots of lawyers who like to spew bullshit.
Yeah.
And so, you and I are going to talk honestly, openly, and forthright. And that's what I've known you to be. And that's why, full disclosure, I've been to the mastermind experience a number of times. And John is an absolutely phenomenal facilitator, and he's brought so many different people together. And I really hope that much of what John has done in his life thus far, he's going to at least be able to share a few of those golden nuggets. So why don't we start, John, with telling the people that are watching this or are going to be listening to this a little bit about your backstory. And by the way, you're 100% right. Not everybody doesn't have a rags to riches story, but it doesn't have to be about money. It doesn't have to be about poverty. I know plenty of wealthy people that have a great story. So it's not about that. And you have a great story. So would you mind sharing your backstory with us a little bit?
Yeah, well, the story is when I was 25 years old, was brought in. My father actually came into a room at that time, and it was an intervention deal. And it was basically a room with my three sisters, my mother, a lawyer's conference room in upstate New York in the Hudson Valley. And we all sat around a table. My dad comes in, and we share our how his alcoholism has affected our lives. And one by one, we go through the story. And at the end of this, Neal, my father walked out and he said, very stoic, he said, thanks, sometime I'll get treatment, but not today. And he left and he never got the treatment that he needed. But here's how that transformed my life, because during this, I realized that I had always blamed myself for my father's drinking. I said, as a child, as a 7-year-old, I was blaming myself for my father's drinking. And the person who sort of oversaw the intervention said, that's very common that children of alcoholic parents will blame themselves for their parents drinking. I'm like, that's crazy. I never occurred to me that that was common. And he said, what's happening to you is the norm. It would be unusual if you didn't feel that way. And I had used that. My mother, who is an absolute saint, she taught my sisters and I to sort of shield ourselves from the alcoholism and act like it didn't happen. The problem, Neal, was we took that shield and just acting like it didn't affect us. And I applied it to every relationship in my life. So up to the age of 25, I really didn't have any genuine relationships outside of sports. It was just simply shielding myself because I would not feel pain if I never really showed vulnerability or my genuine feelings and emotions. And slowly after the intervention, Neal, I started to change. And I was shortly after that, I met my current wife and I started sharing with her my feelings and thoughts, and she didn't laugh at me. And it was like, this might be okay. And now we've been married for 30 years, actually this year. And so it's actually worked out really well. And I've taken that, Neal, and I've applied it to other relationships in my life, but also to trial law, where I'm sharing things, I'm sharing vulnerabilities and weaknesses. And Neal, I don't wait to opening statement to start to share the danger point of my case. I tell it right out of the box in jury selection.
Right.
And whatever that danger point is, and it may be totally unrelated to the case, but what I'm really doing is I'm bonding and building credibility with the jury. And you can use that same thing and do it with anyone in your life.
Well, first of all, happy 30th anniversary. That is an amazing feat nowadays. And I've met your wife, and you're what seems to be a perfect couple. And I know how important family is to you. And I do want to get back to that because that's an integral part of your life. So I'm just curious though, like in my life, I didn't have really genuine relationships either when I was younger. And I was always a very sensitive kid. And I never wanted to show that part of me because I didn't think it was cool. I didn't think anybody would like me if I showed that part of it. And it was only when I met, honestly, a few girls who actually did like my sensitivity did I say, oh, somebody actually likes this. And, and I'm being honest, it's not underhanded. And so I continued along that path. So I completely understand that. And I give you a lot of credit for remaining authentic and being vulnerable, because that, I'm sure, has helped in your success. So I guess the next question is, are you always thinking about being a lawyer? How did you come to that?
No, actually, the last thing in the world I wanted to do was become a lawyer. My mission was to be on Wall Street in New York. That's really
Right.
what I wanted to do. In college, I worked in Manhattan for these financial companies, investment companies, doing like the grunt work, doing the work that no one wanted to do. But I'm absolutely fascinated by investments. And I always have been. And in fact, in college, I was investing and I was doing crazy stuff, things that no kid should be doing, really,
Right.
with like options and things like that. But I was really into that. And my father said to me when I was in college, he said, well, you can go to business school, but I'm not paying for it. If you go to law school, I'll pay for it. I said, done.
Yes.
So I went to law school, and Neal, I loved law school. So I really enjoyed it. And I went, I've actually loved bar exams. It's kind of weird like that. I love, just like you, I love writing, right? And so it's weird. People tell me all the time, that they want a book, but they don't really like writing. I said, don't write a book if you don't like writing. The only person I'd ever recommend to write a book is when they're like you and they say, I'm dying to get this book out, to give it to my family and my kids and share it with the world. And if you're dying and you can't keep it in anymore, you've got to share that book.
Yeah, and it's funny. I have to tell everybody that there was a phone call that I made to John. I'm not sure if he remembers this. And I said to John that I was going to hire a ghostwriter, and I hired somebody whose name I will not mention, and it wasn't working out. And I was telling John about my frustration, and I asked him, what do you think? And it didn't take him a second to say to me, write it yourself. And I was like, for a moment, I was like, oh shit, I don't have all this time and everything. And the truth is, it was a 2-year project. There were months when I couldn't write at all for whatever reason. And there were times that I don't know, I probably wrote about 20 pages. And it was cathartic, it was healing, but it was also very emotional. And the truth is, John's advice was spot on. Had I not written that book, I would not have gotten the positive feedback that I received. Nobody could ever write your story the way you can. So, a part of me wants to thank you for that, but part of me also wants to tell everybody else, if that's something that you ever want to do, strongly advise you to write your own book, just as you said.
Well, Neal, there's a member of our mastermind, and I'm not revealing any confidences by saying this, but his wife came to me and said, I was kidnapped when I lived in Venezuela, and she was talking about the same thing. How can I ghostwrite this story? I said, this story's got to be written by you.
Right.
You know the story. It can't be ghostwritten as well. And that book, it has to be a masterpiece. It has to be, because if you write that masterpiece, you're going to have it your whole career. And it will be something that it's the cornerstone of everything that you do. And so she did that. She wrote her book. Other than you, there's only one other person in our mastermind I've recommended. He's an attorney in Chicago. And I said, he told me this. It's like my burning desire to write this story. Then you've got to write it. You can't let other people write the story. Who's in the waiting room? If somebody ghost wrote that story for you, it wouldn't be nearly as good.
Right.
And that's not an indictment on them.
Right.
It's just the fact it's got to come from you because you lived it.
Yeah.
And I love to write. Seth Price always says, one of our friends, he says, do what you love. And whatever it is that you love to doing, that's where you want to spend your life, basically. But Neal, the tragedy is, how many people spend their life doing what they love? Very few. They work to 9 to 5. They hate their job. They're miserable. And it's sort of like, man, you can't do that. So my job, and it's a continuing work in progress to this day, is getting to the point, there's only 2 things that I love about the practice of law. One is trial work and one is business development. And that's it. I don't like anything else. I don't do depositions. I don't do paperwork because not that I'm not good at it. I just don't like it, And so you find the things in your life that you're unique and passionate about, and you do better than anyone else in the world. And then you try to spend as much time in that unique ability as you can. And that's the secret. Because Neal, most people spend 5 to 10% of their time in the unique ability, but the goal should be spending about 85% of your time doing that, the stuff that you love.
Well said. And that brings us to this, which was how I met John Fisher. And I'm sure he doesn't know, and I'll tell you why he doesn't know, because I met him at I think it was a PILMA conference in Dallas. And he was giving out these books for free, which he does all the time. And there was a line out the door for people who wanted the book and wanted him to sign it. And so I said, sure, I'll take the book. Why not? And I waited online, and he signed it. It was a very nice inscription there. And I read the book. And for anybody, now this book, when was it written, book?
2013.
So 2013. I promise you that everything in this book is still valuable. There's nothing that AI or digital that has made this just as important. Quite honestly, it's probably more important today than it was then because of digital and AI, which leads me to a couple of questions. First of all, what led you to write this book, which, by the way, I know thousands of people that have this book.
Yeah.
You've gotten great reviews. Everybody always talks about it. It's one of a kind book. Tell me what brought you to that.
Well, the first 14 years of my career, I worked for a firm in Albany, New York. Great firm, amazing lawyers, like in a very elite catastrophic injury firm. And I worked with a lawyer who was an amazing guy, John Powers, and his partner, Dan Santola, and they were just phenomenal trial lawyers. And so John decided at one point, he said, that he and I were a team. And I'm in my 20s at this point. And so I'm figuring these things out. And so, Neal, my first trial was a brain damaged baby case. And I'm like in my mid to late 20s. And so my law firm says, go there. We'll be there to support you. Just, prepare, do your thing. So I show up in court. It's my first trial. There's a line of defense lawyers, but they're all like 30 years older than I'm. And the judge is waiting there. And I look back in the courtroom on the first day. There's nobody in the courtroom. No one from my law firm showed up. Like, what the hell am I going to do?
Yeah, right.
You know what? I figured it out, Neal. And like every night, including to now, I just got done a month ago with the trial in Westchester. I've never figured out this balance of life thing. Never. It doesn't resonate with me when people talk about that. Because I'll work till 1 a.m., get up at 4 and keep working. And I'll do that for 3 weeks straight. And it's crazy. Eventually you do crash when that happens. Look, people will be critical of this, Neal, and they'll say, what good is anything when you're just working all the time? It's like, I'm doing what I love. What is the problem with that? If you're doing what you love, it's a gift. It's not a curse. And so my wife and I, we take our kids on great trips to Israel, to Africa, to Turkey. We go everywhere. And we're going to Portugal on a mastermind this summer. And the reality is we enjoy life, but I also love work. You know what I mean? And I don't want to give that up. But do I love everything about it? No, I just do trials and business development. That's all I like. The other stuff, I just outsource it to other people. I hired an attorney this year who's 5 years older than I am. He's a phenomenal trial attorney. And now he does all of the depositions for us. I don't do any depositions anymore. And so he handles everything for me. And if I want to try a case, I'll try it. But if not, he'll try the case. And it's a really good relationship. So this is what I would say to anyone is write down a list of the 5 things that you love doing more than anything. Then write the 5 things that you hate doing and be granular. Write it down in detail. And then take those 5 things you hate and delegate. And if you can't delegate immediately, how are you going to delegate this? Who's going to do this stuff for you? And if you hate doing paperwork, then don't do it. Get rid of the stuff that you hate doing and do the stuff that you love.
Yeah, I have to say, and if you want to do that, this book, The Power of a System, is key. I know that when I have a problem with another law firm, for whatever reason, I look at my legal assistant and I said, Gail, what do you think? She says, they have to read John Fisher's book. There's no system. And when you don't have a system, things break down very quickly. And one of the things that, that I kind of have a niche in is bringing in the cases, bringing in work. And if you don't have a system for bringing in cases, you're going to lose a lot. A lot of the other cases are going to fall through the cracks. So I guess my question is on this, have you found, the answer is probably, pretty obvious, but have you found a tremendous success when you started implementing all these systems?
No, not at first. I mean, it was really a struggle. And I now have a website called Fisherpedia where we have a chatbot where you can instantly access all of our systems just by a query, and it will access our systems, procedures. But the reality is it's hard running a law firm. It's really hard. And you think that when I started my firm, by the way, I got fired at that firm. So that's the reason why I left. They let me go. One day I walk in there and they say, we're parting ways, John. And I'm like, what the hell am I going to do right now? I got a wife and I have 3 adopted kids from Russia. And like, what the hell am I going to do? They're just little tykes at that time. And I'm like, oh man. But that was the genesis of the book, because the first thing I've got to do is I write every system for a law firm, because it doesn't matter that I know the stuff. The people who work for us need to know us. Even if it's one paralegal, they need to know the systems, because you can't be answering the same recurring questions over and over again. And so my policy in the firm is, if somebody comes to me, I'm going to say, you can ask me any question, but I'm going to ask you, do we have a system for it? Because I don't think I've eaten in McDonald's for 30 years, but the reality is they created a system. So if you go to Istanbul, Turkey, you'll have the same Big Mac that you'd have in Queens. It's the same one, because their systems are all identical. And that's why McDonald's is an enormous restaurant chain, because you're not going to find differences in Queens to Istanbul. And so it's the same thing for a law firm. Master systems, recurring policies that happen, how to open the law firm, how to make coffee in the morning, whatever it is, just create it into a system, because you don't want to be answering the same questions over and over again. Become very systematic in your thinking.
And the systems that you've created has given you the freedom to do the things that you say you like doing, building relationships with other attorneys, because I know that's where you get a lot of your work from, and meeting with your clients. And that was one of the things that you and I once talked about. I think we were in Chicago and we were on a boat or something, and we both talked about, I think I had said to you that one of our brethren criticized me because I was spending too much time with the clients, that it wasn't really necessary for me to spend so much time with the clients. And obviously, that goes in one ear and out the other, because it's my opinion that my clients are my partners. Mm-hmm. In each and every case, they are my partner. They're coming to me because I have a certain set of skills, and I want their case for whatever reason. Maybe it's money, maybe it's a unique opportunity, maybe it's a part of the law that I really like. It could be a whole bunch of things. The bottom line is there's a mutual need for each other. So why wouldn't you treat them like a partner? And a partner, you would see them in person. You would talk to them in person. You wouldn't necessarily send a private investigator to sign up the case. And I think you agreed with me when I talked about that.
Yeah. Well, I practice in Alabama too. And so there was a severely disabled little baby in Alabama, in northeastern Alabama. I went to see the family, and I'm meeting them in their mobile home with their extended family there. And we discuss the case. They then go away and they come back and they say, we're hiring you. And I said, well, why? You've got all these law firms in Birmingham, Alabama. And they said, because you're the only lawyer who came to our home. That means everything.
100%.
Birmingham is 1 hour from their home. It would take me like probably 24 hours to drive to where they are. But the reality is, I just made the point of building the relationship with them. Neal, very few times do I have clients in my office because I see them in their home. I can't understand their disability from my office, but I can if I'm in their home. I need to see what their struggles are. But most importantly, that builds the relationship. So if I have a client who is an Orthodox Jewish person in Brooklyn, I'm going to their community. I'm meeting them. I'm meeting their family. I'm learning their customs, their traditions, because that they know that I care about them when I do these things. And contrary to what every lawyer will ever tell you, I give my clients my cell phone. I say, call me.
Right. Yeah.
You need something, it's important, call me.
You give concierge service to
Yeah.
your clients. And
Yes.
a lot of lawyers, look, everybody has their own way of doing things. Anything but that goes against my grain. And I have to tell you, you're handling cases for the most part that are extremely significant injuries where people's lives have been absolutely devastated. How could you not give concierge service to those clients? You're going to do everything by e-signature, or you're going to do everything by Zoom. I mean, I guess it has its place, but for the most part, no way. And that's why, when you said that to me, it resonated a lot with me, because that's how I feel. I meet most of my clients, quite honestly. We usually meet for a cup of coffee somewhere. And when we meet, quite honestly, the first thing I ask them is, tell me something about yourself. And
Yeah.
we usually wind up talking for a half hour, and it has nothing to do with the case. And by the time we get to the first information about the case, they've already decided to hire me. They found something in common. We laughed. Maybe they cried about something. I mean, it is key. And so, I'm glad that you're bringing this up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this case in Alabama, I took the bar exam, got admitted in
Wow.
Alabama, in Montgomery, Alabama. And I can tell you this, the case didn't turn out the way that I was hoping. I mean, it did settle, but it wasn't a fraction of what I was hoping the case. And I
Right.
really felt bad about the whole thing because, the little child died. It was really bad. And you know what, Neal? The client could have gotten really upset and they could have let me have it. But I had taken the time to build the relationship. So when you have that relationship, they are more understanding. And if you make a mistake or something, they're understanding and they say, don't worry about it. And they want for you. And the nicest thing, I had a case about a year ago that resulted in a defense verdict. And afterwards, the client was kind of like tearing up. And I said, I feel so bad for you. And they said, I'm not crying for myself. I'm crying for you.
Right. I haven't told many people this, but I guess I'm telling a number of people now. A number of years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night in a sweat. What do you think that is? You know this because you're in the same business that I am. And I wondered whether it was a labor law case and it was against the school construction authority. And I said to myself, did I file the notice of claim against the school construction authority? Now, these were two people who were wonderful people. They were from South America, great people. We had a really good relationship. I went to the office on the weekend, probably destroyed the office looking for a notice of claim that I did, and I couldn't find it. And it was the first time that had ever happened to me. Most of the time, I would walk into the office and say, oh, I did it, and everything would be fine. This time, I realized I didn't do it. So I had to bring the clients in. I had my partner sitting there. I had a legal assistant sitting there. And I told the client, I said, listen, here's what happened. I made a mistake. You have the right to file a claim. You have a right to get another lawyer, but I do have a path to success. And I explained the outline of the path to success. It had to do with co-defendants. And I said, why don't you take a few minutes to think about it? And he says, we don't need to think about it. We're staying with you. And I'll tell you the truth, I wanted to cry right there. I probably did tear up a little bit. And I was so happy. And in the end, the case settled for a fair amount of money, what the case was actually worth. But the point of the story is just what you said. Would that have happened had I not had the strong relationship that I had with them? I believe that had I not had that relationship, they would have walked.
Yeah.
And so having that type of relationship, you're right, that reinforces everything that you just said. It's just key. It's key. And I don't think there's anything better than having those bonds with your clients. So I know everything that you're saying is accurate, and I've seen it in practice.
Well, Neal, one thing I'll say, if somebody is a young lawyer or an older lawyer and they're like, I'm just starting my firm, I don't know what to do. My advice is always the same. Have a party. Have a party, invite everyone you know, all your clients, because I do that. With every book, I've had cruises on the Hudson River in New York where I'll rent like a mini yacht. I'll have some music and I'll invite not just attorneys, but clients, and they'll come up to me with their family and they'll be like, we never knew that you thought of us as a friend, but you need to build those relationships. You could do this at like an Italian restaurant or anywhere. They want to know that they matter to you and that you care about them. And what this does, Neal, is in my career, I've only had one client who fired me, and I didn't want them as a client anyway. So the reality is, you build the relationships. It doesn't really matter what the result is that you get for the client because they're forgiving. If you get a great result, fine. But if you don't, they are very forgiving and understanding because you've spent the time to build the relationship. It's so important.
Yeah.
And I think like when it comes to the virtual world, yes, we could do a mastermind virtually, digitally, but it's not the same as when you're face to face with the people in a room for a day. It just makes a big difference. And it's, you know what people like about the mastermind the most? The relationships, the camaraderie,
Right.
all of that stuff. That's what they like the most. That's not going to happen in the digital world.
100%. I said before that a number of your cases, as you have said multiple times, come from other attorneys. They're referred cases. So do you apply the same relational attributes to your attorneys as you would to other people? Do you build those relationships up?
Well, Neal, this came from the mastermind, Michael McCready. I'll give him credit for this. The first mastermind, in fact, I think you were there in Chicago, is Michael said to me, you know, the problem I have is I refer work to other attorneys and I never hear back from them. I don't know what's going on. And then one day I get a check, but I'm like, great, but I still don't know what happened with the case. And so I decided that we are going to change our mindset from not just serving clients, but serving referring attorneys and updating them fanatically.
Right.
And I tell our intake team, update, update, update. No such thing as over communication. Let them tell you that it's too much rather than holding back.
Right.
So the way that I build these relationships, and right now we have 673 referring attorneys, is we update, update, update constantly, including about 98% of the cases that we're not taking. Here's what we did. We got the records. We consulted with our surgeon. He doesn't think the case has merit. Here's the reason. And then if you get that and your client calls you, Neal, then you can say, you can talk intelligently with the client as to the reasons you're not taking it. But if I just said we're declining it, it'd be like, okay, what do I tell the client? So over communicating with lawyers is key. And that's what I've tried to build our niche in. But I also, the one thing that amazes me with lawyers is they focus on all the fancy stuff like pay-per-click, Google local service ads, all this other stuff. But you know, Neal, we're in a room with 500 lawyers and we ask them, where do you get your best cases? 9 out of 10 will say referrals. And then we'll ask them, well, referrals from whom? Half the room will say from former clients, half the room will say lawyers. So roughly half the room is getting their best cases from lawyer referrals. Yet if you ask them in a big room, how many of you have a system that's documented in writing for nurturing and acquiring lawyer referrals? Not a single hand will go up. So they don't have a hand. I mean, it's like, that's crazy. If you're getting your best cases from lawyers, and I know I do, then why wouldn't you be nurturing these relationships? So Neal, if I go out to lunch, and Craig Goldenfarb taught us this, go to lunch every week with a prospective referral partner or a current referral partner. And then when I have lunch, and we've had for years a woman in Iowa, Bev, who coordinates everything for me. She'll schedule the lunches, and then I go to lunch. I find out something about you that's unique. And then I had a lunch with a guy who was on the Colgate diving team. So Bev goes out, she gets him a sweatshirt, a cap, Colgate diving team.
That's great. That's great.
I'm not sending them a mug with my law firm's name on it. They don't care about that. But if I personalize it towards their interests, if you're a Yankees fan, I'm going to get you a jersey with Goldstein on the back of it. And number 2, right? Something that's personalized to you.
That's phenomenal. You know, I was talking to somebody recently and I said to them, look, even this has nothing to do with spending a lot of money on somebody else. If you're a young lawyer, you shouldn't be spending a lot of money on anything. But if you have a budget, the best thing to do, I don't know, go to a really nice pizza place and sit down with somebody and have 4-star conversation. Okay, at a 1-star restaurant. I've done that a lot. Have a 4-star conversation at a 1-star restaurant. The key is having the conversation, talking, getting to know each other, and not talking about the law. You don't have to do any of that. Just as John said, find out about what their interests are, what they like, and what you might have in common. Often you'll find that you do have a lot in common. Exactly what you're doing.
Neal, whenever I go to lunch with another attorney, they'll say to me, and I'll give you this example. One time, a very prominent medical malpractice defense attorney came to my office with a big box of files, and it was a big case. It was a judge's law clerk who died in a hospital. Really good case. Boxes and boxes of stuff. And I said to him, I really appreciate that you brought the case to me, but why didn't you go with my old law firm, which is much bigger, they're more established, and everybody knows them? And he goes, well, we thought about that, but we like you better. And so the point of that is they weren't hiring me because they think I'm a better lawyer, because I'm not, than my old law firm, but they were hiring me because I took the time to get to know them. I get the time to know who their kids are, what their family is, what they like doing. And every time I go out to lunch with another lawyer, we don't talk about the law at all. We talk about their family, we talk about sports, we talk about everything. And at the end of the meeting, almost 100% of the time, they'll say, you know what? I've got like 3 or 4 malpractice cases that are sitting on my desk, and I was going to send them to the other firm, but why don't I just send them to you? And then once I get my foot in the door, then our systems are set up where we nurture and cultivate the relationship. And then we rarely lose a referral partner. But it's taking the time to break bread with somebody that is invaluable.
So before I talk about another book that you wrote that I truly enjoyed, I want to ask you, you have such a deep passion for communicating in an honest way with your clients. I'm just curious. I know you kind of said where it might have come from, but I'm not sure I really got that. Did it come from growing up, and were you taught that by somebody?
No, it really dates back to that intervention that I shared, where I learned about revealing weakness and vulnerability is empowering. It's amazing. And then when you do that with your spouse, whatever I say, I don't believe in transactions, Neal. Like if somebody comes to me, I don't really care what they give me. I don't care if it's 50-50. I don't really care. And the amazing thing is if I just give to them, if like, for example, in our mastermind, and sometimes Seth and I will have a disagreement. He'll say, let's scale down the expenses. Let's go to the cheaper hotel. Like, no, we're going to the nicest hotel in New York City. The reason we're doing that, because I want to blow people away when they come to the mastermind. Like we have Andrew Finkelstein coming to our next mastermind in New York City. I said, let's get the best presenter, not just in New York State, let's get the best in the country. And that's Andrew, really. And so let's surround these people. So if this is your first mastermind, Neal, you'll be like, I'm blown away by this. This is unbelievable. I can't believe I only spent $1,000 for this. Right. And I was like, you're right. I mean, I want to give so much valuable that it far exceeds what anyone expects, but in every relationship. And Neal, you have such a beautiful relationship with your wife. And one of the things I can tell you, relationship advice, just with your marriage, give everything and expect nothing. And if you give everything to make your wife the happiest person in the world, it's going to come back in spades to you, because they're going to want to reciprocate by giving back to you. And I see such a beautiful relationship that you have with your wife, and I love it. And I'm not really that great at this, but I always try, what can I do to make my wife's life better? Can I clean this? Can I do this? Can I make her dinner? So I've become a really good cook. I know how to make like 5 solid dinners that are really good. My wife will laugh at this. She thinks they're not, but I think they are good. And I'll cook these meals, and my wife, I'll say, you can't do anything. I'm going to set the table. I'm going to clean everything. I'm going to make you these meals, and I'm going to spend a couple hours doing it, because I'm nurturing that relationship, which is most important in my life, which is my wife. Because our kids are going to move on, but our wives are going to be there, right? So we have to focus on them.
Not 100%, 1,000%. So that brings me to this. And this was John's book, Win Today, another one that I've read completely. And I found this in some ways, for me, even though I keep the system around all the time, this was extremely meaningful, because John, as you could see, the vulnerable person he is, basically wrote this book. I think you wrote it for your children.
Right.
And this was a guide to how to live a better life. And so I'm going to ask you, what brought you to this book, and how has it resonated? I think it's resonated great, but I love the book because there's so much here. Just don't have enough time to talk about it, but there's so much information that you've given us some of which I've used, especially when it comes to dieting. Tell us, how was that created?
Well, hey, Neal, when I was 17 years old, my father wrote by hand an 11-page letter that gave his best advice to his son, and it was pearls of wisdom. Right. My father loved writing, and he was really into Shakespeare. So he's quoting Shakespeare, he's quoting literature throughout, and I just saved that, and I put that letter in the book. So it's verbatim, that letter. It was just amazing. And I keep referring back to that letter throughout my life because it's full of pearls of wisdom. So I thought, what an amazing gift for a parent to give to their child, which is a book. Because, Neal, if you talk to your kids and you give them advice, let's face it, they forget the advice that we give them. But if you write it in a book, then it's in granite. And they might not read it right away, but with time, they might realize that we're smarter than they think.
Yeah, maybe.
So eventually, maybe they'll read that book and they're like, I encompassed everything, my advice on health, everything, my faith, my financial, how to invest in. And like, Neal, I tell my kids, if you just invest a little bit of your money when you're 18 and just keep going every year, that doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit. And it's a guaranteed path to success. And Neal, Warren Buffett, do you know how much of his wealth he had accumulated before the age of 65? 2%.
Right.
98% of his wealth came after the age of 65. Because what happens is it snowballs over time. You start building it and it gets better and better. And the key thing to success financially is the ability to overcome horrible times. So like when the pandemic hit and the market tanks in 2008 and 1998, the market tanked like 40%. And you know what happens then, Neal? Because I was the trustee of my firm's 401k, everybody cashes out. They're like, we're done. We can't lose 40%. We've worked hard for this money. And I'm like, well, that's the difference between a good investor and a bad one. Because a good investor is just saying, I'm going to stay the course. I'm not going to change anything. Now is not the time to sell. I'm just going to stay. And within 1 year of all of those bad cataclysmic times, the market came back to where it was before. You just had to be patient. That's all. And I try to distill that advice with my kids. So my kids, when they have a Roth IRA, they think about more like the fancy stuff that they say, like maybe a car company or something like that. And I always say to them, find the companies that are on the Fortune list of the top 100 that their employees love working for, because those are the companies that are not only the best, but they're going to be around forever. And if you invest in a company like Apple or NVIDIA, but there's lots of them, and you invest in them, then with time, you'll do great.
Yeah, the key, of course, for our children is that they have the time, and that's 100% correct. So right. You mentioned somewhere in there something about success. So let me ask you, do you feel at this point, look, let's think about what you do. You've authored multiple books. You have a very successful mastermind. You have a very successful law practice in which you try cases still. And you might be all over the country. You speak at different events. Have you ever felt burnt out? Has it ever come to the point where you say, you know what, I got to take a break?
No, I've never felt burnt out. But the reality is I don't feel successful either. I really don't. And the thing is, I'm the type of person who's always paranoid. And like my wife is sleeping, I think I'm up at like 4 o'clock this morning. I get up, go to the gym, do this. And by the time I'm out the door, she might still be sleeping. So, right. I mean, energy has never been a real issue for me, unfortunately, but paranoia is. And I have to tell you, I have mental health struggles like everybody. We all do.
Right.
Like if somebody comes to my firm and they say, do you know that candidate for a job, they've got mental health problems? I saw that on social media. I'm like, screw it. So do I. So who cares?
Right.
I don't care. I mean, we focus on psychiatric malpractice and birth injury. So like, I'm very sympathetic to people with mental health. I struggle at times myself. Right. And so, there are times that I'm really down. And, look, we could all put a spin on things. When the pandemic hit, all the lawyers would say, you'd ask them, how are you doing? And you know what they'd say, Neal? What would they give an answer to you?
How they're doing? They're doing great.
Yeah, we're doing great.
Phenomenal.
Things
Phenomenal.
could not be better, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
all I'm thinking is, man, I'm scared to death right now. Are you kidding me?
Uh,
And
uh,
so I said to Seth Price, I go, we're going to be okay in the first year of the pandemic, but after that, I'm not so sure. And he goes, don't worry about it. I'm not going to let that happen to you. And when you have friends like that who got your back through everything, and Neal, that's the real power of the mastermind. You got friends who got your back for everything. That becomes, you can't fail at that point.
yeah,
It's invaluable.
100% right. And let me just say, for whatever it's worth, uh, seeing what you've accomplished in your life, and I believe you're younger than me, uh, I consider you a success. Look at your family and how close you are and all the things that you do, how vulnerable you are out there. I think you're a success. So whatever that's worth. So
Thank you.
I'd like to just, as we try to finish up here, I'd like to ask you a few quick questions that I try to ask everybody that I speak to. What's one thing that you could tell a young lawyer that will make them stand out as that one lawyer?
Yeah. So if you're 25 years old and you're just out of law school, what I would say is you need to join a mastermind of lawyers who are elite and doing things much better than you and leverage their wisdom and knowledge so you're not making the same mistakes that they made. That's the key to success in this. If there's one book that I could recommend to anyone, it's easy. Non-religious, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That book has influenced every aspect of my life. Dale Carnegie training, Neal. I was an assistant instructor there for years. It's changed my life. It's not just about public speaking. It's about doing things that you're most afraid of doing, that you're like, I can't call that person. I can't do this. No, you're going to do it today and you're going to do it right now. And when you break through those barriers, you're like, that wasn't so bad. That person's actually pretty nice. Then let's take that next barrier and let's break that one down. Neal, when you came to our first mastermind in Chicago, I thought maybe this thing's going to be a big failure. Who cares? Let's try it anyway.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely how you felt. And well, you see what happened. Very successful. The second question I have is, if you can go back and talk to yourself, your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
Wow, that's a tough one. I would say, here's the thing. No one is going to learn from anything that you say. They're not. They're going to ignore it. But they will learn from the way that you lived your life. My mother is an absolute saint, Neal. My mother spent her life helping the disabled and the homeless. And it's not what I hear, because she doesn't talk about it. I see her doing this. I see her going to the group home for disabled people. I see her helping up that. And in New York City, everyone just walks by the homeless person. But my mother would never do that. She would help them. She would, even if she didn't have money, she would give them a nice gesture or something like that, because that's what we're on this earth to do, is to help other people. And the way I look at our purpose in this world is the impact that we have on the lives of others. That will stick with this world for eternity. What we do for ourselves, the houses, the cars, that's gone and forever. It doesn't matter. But what the impact we have. So in the mastermind, Neal, the biggest impact is not what I don't make money from it. So it's not that. I do leverage the wisdom of others. It's not that. It's seeing young attorneys succeed in their law firms is huge for me. And that's the reason I do it.
Final question. Is there someone you've lost personally or professionally who you'd want one more conversation with? And if so, what would you say to them? Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot, but you're a vulnerable guy. You could do it.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you something. It's when I was actually not a good student in school up through just about high school. And then I had somebody who came and challenged me, and he called me a loser and said, his name was Brother Armand. And Brother Armand said, "You're a loser." And I said to him, well, that's kind of mean. And he challenged me. He said, you have more ability than anyone in this school, but you don't try. And he challenged me. And I a little bit at a time, I started trying. And then I was like, holy cow, that totally changed everything, because I'm never the smartest person, but I've learned this, Neal, and I think you have too, is that I can outwork anyone. And so if I'm in a courtroom with other attorneys who are a lot smarter than I am and things like that, I realize they can't work harder than I can. I can outwork them every day of the week. So I can beat them almost every time. And that's something that I've learned from my father, but also this brother Armand who challenged me and said, "You're a loser." And that was the impetus that led to me realizing that hard work is the key to success.
Well, boss, you're the bomb, and I love that you came here. It was just a great conversation with you, honest, genuine, and I appreciate your being here. And I hope we could see each other soon.
Well, you model that genuineness and vulnerability better than anyone that I know, Neal, and thank you for that. I'm grateful for our friendship. You have just been a great find, and these friendships are what make the mastermind truly special.
Thanks for being here, John.
You're welcome.
One last thing I was going to say, tell everybody how they can work with you, connect with you, be part of your mastermind.
Okay, well, if anyone wants a free signed copy of my books, The Power of a System, The Law Firm of Your Dreams, and Win Today, all you have to do is send to my personal email. It's jfisher, Fisher, lawyer @gmail.com. We'll send you the free books with my courtesies. Mastermindexperience.com. Our next mastermind is in New York City on May 30th at the Lexington Hotel. It's going to be amazing. We have masterminds in Portugal in July, and then Washington, D.C. in September.
Great. Phenomenal. See you soon.
Okay, take care.
If something here hits home for you, don't keep it to yourself. Tap subscribe, drop a comment, and share this with a lawyer who needs to really hear it. This is That One Lawyer Podcast. See you next time.